Hey, welcome to Dan's Model Works, and as you could see from the title card, we're working on the Cutlass. And I haven't done anything since the last episode, other than pile a bunch of stuff on this workbench. So, we have our main fuselage and wings, and we have the front fuselage, and they actually clip together pretty darn well, he said. Now they won't. There we go. They go together pretty good. Now I'm not going to glue these two assemblies together quite yet. What I would like to do is, you can see we've got some seams that need to be cleaned up right here. See if we can get the camera to cooperate. But I'd rather focus on the paint bottles in behind. That's what I'd rather focus on. I like the paint bottles in behind. There we go. You can see the seam right there. And if we flip it over, you can see that this circular panel right here is just a little offset. So I'm going to want to clean that up. First, I'm going to fill the seam first, and then I'm going to do what I can about restoring these panel lines. So that'll be the first order of business, is putting some putty on here. A bit of assembly that we can do right now while we're waiting for the putty to dry is we can put in the air ducts. Now you can see the engine fronts there. Here are our ducts, and we flip it around. This is right side, so this should go. That would have been a bad thing to flip over. This one goes in here. Yep. That one goes in there. And this one goes in there. So we can easily mock up our nose in order to get these angles right. And it looks like it doesn't have to be precise, but at least it is nice to know that we can quickly pop them in and check the assessment, or check the alignment. So we've got the right side glued in. Fortunately, my light's coming from directly down in this location, but anyway, it turns out we do have a little bit of wiggle room. The angle doesn't have to be exact. I have tested the front cockpit with this in here. It seems to be going together all right. And oh, just in case you were wondering, I did paint the inside of the inlets. I just used some sort of a very light gray. I'm just guessing. Odds are we're not going to be able to see in here very well, but being obsessive, I wanted to get it right. So here's our inlets glued in, or more correctly, the trunking from the inlets glued in. And I think they turned out pretty good. Not hyper-engineered like that Javelin I built, but certainly is better than many kits we've all built in the past, where stuff just kind of fits where it touches. Some time has passed, and my putty dried, and I've sanded, and it looks pretty smooth, but you can see we've got to reestablish our panel lines here. And there's a couple on the top that are going to have to be rescribed as well. So, always a bit of a tricky task there. Actually, it's funny, to the naked eye you can't see this line. However, on the camera you can see it. A trick I will sometimes use if I need to reestablish a panel line across the seam is I'll use a vinyl type tape. This is actually a very fine one from an artist supply store, but a piece of electrical tape will work pretty good. You want something just that has a little bit of thickness and body to it, and you just lay it across your seam and follow the panel line as best you can, which can sometimes be difficult because you'll have a misalignment. Even though you've lined up the parts as best you can, sometimes the scribed panel lines don't agree. All you can do is just kind of average them. But at least this way you can run a scriber along this line and it'll be reasonably straight. At least keep your scriber from straying too much. So the big circular patch lined up pretty good, and I was able to restore that pretty much freehand. And the smaller one over here, I was also able to restore that. But the medium-sized one in the middle was really misaligned, which is strange given that it's the same two pieces of plastic brought together. So even if I was able to bridge the gap, it's still not going to look very good. So there is a workaround for that. More good luck than good management. It just so happens that this hole punch is the same size, approximately, as that panel. So I'm just going to, using some very thin shim stock, I'm going to take the circular bit and I'm going to glue that on. And yes, that's going to be slightly raised, but it'll still be better than that misaligned blob that was there. There's that circular bit glued on. And then I lightly sanded it to reduce its thickness as much as possible. And like I said, I'd rather have this nice and neat and circular than wipe it out completely, or, you know, have a misshapen oval rhombus, if that's such a thing. So I think I'm going to bite the bullet, and I'm going to glue this onto the rear fuselage now. I don't think there's any point in waiting. In this view, you can see I've got the air inlets glued in, and I'm glad I fixed that part. If you recall, in part one of them had a nasty crack and a deformation. There is supposed to be a gap between that line and the fuselage. I'll flash up a picture. You can see it's supposed to be there. Now, our fit isn't perfect. You can see there's a little bit of a step here I'm going to have to sand down. There's one here as well. But I think compared to the way it could have been, it's actually pretty good. So I've dealt with far worse seams. There is one little bit I'm going to have to putty. Right there, I'm going to have to putty that. The other side fit pretty good though. All told, I'm pretty impressed. Oh, there's two other spots right there and right there that I'm going to have to putty. And basically that was a little bit of a wound where the air inlets were attached to the sprue. I don't foresee that being a problem. One thing I have to ask is, how did this thing get enough air to feed the engines? These air inlets are so tiny. A nice touch to the elevon parts is this filleting here that's at the trailing edge. I'm assuming that that's on the real airplane. So this is what it looks like before it goes together, and there, that's what it looks like when it's together. You can actually see it. It's kind of a neat touch. And the nice thing is those fillets top and bottom line up, because I think otherwise that would look terrible. Looking at the vertical tails, it appears that the tails are interchangeable. It looks to me like 70 and 71 go together, and 72 and 73 go together. But then I'll tell you which one goes on which wing. I'm going to assume they're interchangeable. We'll find out in a minute when I glue them together and then see how they fit to the wing. So, by the way, the tails, they look identical, but they're not. If I pop this in place on this side here, you can see that without a whole lot of work, this lines up pretty good. Now, I'm going to have to do a little bit of tweaking, but otherwise it goes on there pretty good. You see that? And it sits pretty flat on the wing. Alright, so if I move it over to the other side though, it's definitely not happy. In order to get it to line up here, we end up with a sizable gap up here, and the tail wants to cant outwards. So yeah, this tail goes over there. Which two parts were this? I don't know, I forget. All I know is that this tail fits really good on this side, and the other one fits on that side, and that's good enough for me. Before I install the tails, I wanted to sand this area on the rear fuselage. There's a little bit of a step, so I've puttied it and I've sanded it, and you can see I've restored the panel lines here that were running vertically. You can see I've done the same thing here on the other side. Panel lines have been rescribed. Now that I've got those in, I can go and put the twin vertical tails on. Hey, we have all the big pieces together. Pretty cool looking airplane. So, things that still have to be remediated. I'm just going to end up probably putting just a little bit of white glue at the bases of the tails here, just because there's a little bit of a gap, very, very small amount. If we look at the air intakes, you can see that a little bit of filler has been used here and sanded down. On the underside here, you can see the filler that's been used here. I'm still not quite happy with this. I'm probably going to put a little bit more filler on there and sand it down again. But recall in part one, I was like, you know, is this kit going to be one of Hobbycraft's pretty good ones, or is it going to be one of these terrible ones? Honestly, it has been pretty good. Everything is fit. Everything has been fairly well engineered. If we look here at the tails, I mean, these lined up really good. So, I can't complain. The leading edge slats still need to be put on. Now, they're designed to be in the extended position, and I think that's probably because on the real aircraft, as soon as the landing gear were down, these automatically came out. So anytime you see the aircraft parked on the ground, probably these slats are open. So no big deal. I'm going to build it with them extended, although I think you probably could, by cutting these things off, just blop these in place, and it would be nice and neat. But I'll go with the slats extended the way they've designed it to be.
I am an idiot.
So why am I an idiot? This is why. I know better than this. I've had this happen I don't know how many times. Less than 10, but more than 3. Add weight to nose. So I was so worried about how well all this stuff was going to fit together that I missed this. So, yeah, as soon as I saw that, I was like, well, let's put the landing legs on, and I was going to be working on them soon anyway. And as you can see, she's a determined tail sitter. Not that there's a whole lot of difference between it sitting properly and resting on its tail. So let's just flip things over. You can see that I've just got the landing legs just kind of stuck in place here with some blue tack, or fun tack, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, how am I going to put that 5 to 10 grams of weight in this thing at this point? See, I could cut the nose off with a razor saw and then just glue it back on. I mean, I think there's a seam line I could follow, but it isn't exactly straight. I could pop off that little disc I put on there, drill a hole, I don't know, inject it with something or other. Well, I did some experimenting to see what kind of weight I needed to balance this. And I'm trying to find the thing I used. Anyway. And just a large bolt here. Is enough to do it. What to do? So this is what my plan is going to be. This area here behind the cockpit has got that large slot for the piece that holds the canopy, so that you can animate it. You can slide it back and forth. Odds are I'm not going to be doing that anyway. Now, this area is tough to see anyhow. Why? Because even though the transparency goes from here all the way forward, this whole back half of it ends up being painted the upper fuselage color. So you can't really see this area anyway. And in terms of the canopy sliding, the canopy is super, super thick at the leading edge where it meets the windscreen. Now I do have a way of thinning that down so that visually it looks okay. But if the canopy is going to be fully closed, you're barely going to be able to see this area anyway. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to widen out this area, make a larger hole, so it doesn't have to be enormous. And once I have that hole, I'm going to pour resin into the hole so that it flows into this area here. It'll end up kind of landing on top of the landing gear bay, and hopefully a lot of it will flow up into the nose. So long as I've got it basically at an angle like this when I put it in, most of it should go up in this area here. The only place where it might leak through is where the landing leg connects, and if a little bit does leak through there, I can always just drill and clear that out again. And you may be thinking, isn't resin expensive? Yes, it is. Resin is expensive. But the resin I have on hand is really getting long in the tooth. Before I do another project where I'm going to have to do a lot of resin casting, I'm going to have to buy more resin anyway. So I may as well use up what I have on hand. You can see it wants to settle out here. I may as well make use of it to solve this problem. Well, we'll see what happens. There's the hole I've milled into the area behind the seat. And this is not going to be hard to clean up at all. Just basically putting a styrene plate over that will solve the problem. And this area shouldn't just be completely smooth and open. There's probably some sort of a mechanism there for making the seats, or for making the canopies slide, that sort of thing. So that's all I have to do is put that in, and that will cover over that. I think it'd be better than putting a clear styrene rod under the tail of the aircraft, which is what I'd have to do otherwise. So I'm gonna have to bite the bullet, mix up some resin, dump it in there, and see what happens. So how do I know that I'm gonna have enough resin to make up the weight I need? Well, there's my my B mixture there, or my B mix, and there's my A, the hardener. I've already poured it into my mixing cup. So you figure you've got basically twice this is what I'm going to end up with. So that's definitely going to be a lot of weight I'm putting in the nose. You can see that it's already wanting to settle out. So this resin isn't happy. I may as well use it up for this purpose. Wish me luck. Well, that was almost catastrophic. I didn't need a tiny bit of the amount of resin I mixed up. I mixed up way more than I needed. And as you can see, the floor is a little shiny because the nose quickly filled up faster than I thought it would. And it started to flow into the cockpit. So I had to use some Q-tips to kind of, suction some of it up. So I'm going to have to paint the floor black. And then, of course, I'm going to have to drill a little hole for my control stick to go in. But I think it will be okay after all. We usually bemoan the fact that you can't see all the detail we put inside a cockpit. So it looks worse than it is. It was only maybe about 1/8 of an inch at the thickest in there. Just enough that I saw it coming up and I was like, ah, stop, abort. So it's currently setting up. The nose is warm, but not hot enough that it's gonna melt or anything like that. There was a tiny bit of leakage oozing out around the nose gear bay, but considering that I got almost all of the resin from here forward, that should be enough. I'm gonna have to wait till tomorrow when I'm certain that all the resin has gone off inside here before putting the nose gear in place and seeing how she balances. But maybe it was a little bit reckless, but I think I got away with it. So this masking tape monstrosity is so that I can paint the undercarriage bays gloss white. Now, I know the whole underside of the plane is eventually going to be painted white, but I'm not ready to go there yet. But I do want to get the landing gear bays done, mostly so that I can give them a wash and bring out some of the detail, because there is some nice detail in there. And I'm planning on painting the landing gear at the same time. So this way I'm not going to be putting more paint on the underside than I have to. When it comes time to paint the underside, I'll fill the landing gear bays with something to mask those off. So yeah, this may seem a little extreme, but it's just keeping the amount of paint that's going on the underside of the plane to a minimum. Okay, let's get this mountain of tape off here. Did I put enough tape on it? No, I didn't. Kind of reminds me of the tape monster of a few years ago when Natasha was painting her Blue Angel plane. Alright, there we go. There's our landing gear bays, all nice and white. And at the same time, I also painted the landing gear. You can see how much longer that front nose gear leg is. And also painted the wheels and the tires. Now, I still have to do some filling on the tires of the main wheel. Actually, all 4 of them are going to need some filling. But you know what? At least I got the centers filled. I shouldn't have to molest them as I'm filling these sinkhole marks. Well, they're not even sinkholes. They're ejector pin marks. But I shouldn't have to fool with the hubs, and I just wanted to get them painted up at the same time. So an update on the ballast situation. The resin alone got me enough to balance it, but it just seemed like it was just only barely. So I ended up throwing a couple of lead fishing weights, or whatever alloy it is, in the hole, and I poured some white glue in there, and it's definitely heavy enough in the nose now to keep it from being a tail sitter. Although, as you'll see probably in part 3 when we hopefully wrap this up, that it still looks like a tail sitter even when it's not sitting on its tail. This is one very high nose aircraft. So anywho, it's been about a week since I put that resin in the nose, and yeah, the this batch of resin right here, it's going in the garbage because it's not going to be good for any sort of actual molding or anything like that anymore. There's something definitely, I think, gone wrong with the bee mixture. It's all settling out, as I think I mentioned when I was doing the pour. Oh well, I'd rather get rid of it and then buy new when I have to do a bunch of pouring or resin casting in the future. The thing is the floor up here still has kind of a bit of a goopy residue in it. Even though I've cleaned it up a couple times, I think it's almost stabilized now, and I should be able to put some paint in there, but, you know, it took a week to get to this point. So anyway, I want to wrap this episode up. The main thing that we don't have mounted is the leading edge slats, and I've got one of them here. And they just go on like this. This is the only one I've cleaned up, and like I said, I want to get this episode up. So I'm going to wrap things up right now. As you can see, we have all the big bits together. I've got the weapons pylons on. I think she's looking pretty solid and complete. Like I said, just the leading edge slats, and then a plethora of antennas and pitot tubes and stuff have got to go on. But I'm calling this episode done. I'm happy with the progress we made, even if it took me 3 weeks versus 1 week from when I started working on it again. I think it looks really cool. No escaping that. They were definitely a handful to fly, although I think in terms of actual flying and handling qualities, there was no quibbles with it. It was the fact that the hydraulic system wasn't up to snuff, the landing gear wasn't up to snuff, and the engines were underpowered. So, I have got to start getting ready for a trip that we're taking at the end of the week. I've got one more day of work and then I'm on vacation. So, yeah. Thanks for watching. Until next time, just keep on modeling.
Sit, Indy, sit. Good dog.